Welcome to the Calmer Mom podcast, where we go from conception through pregnancy, birth, and beyond to help you be the mom your kids are actually asking for. Pregnancy, birth, and motherhood aren't easy, but they don't have to be so hard. You're not alone in this journey. I'm Michelle Noble, creator of the Calmer Mom Project. Mama, I've been there, and I've got your back. So let's begin. Welcome to the first episode of the Calmer Mom podcast. I am Michelle Noble, the Calmer Mom coach, and I am so grateful that you are here. I'm grateful you're here because I have noticed that what is considered normal or usual in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood doesn't actually work for most women, or actually their children either. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess that you are also aware of that and are asking for an experience in pregnancy, birth, and beyond that actually works for you. The reason I'm doing this podcast and the reason I created the Calmer Mom Project is that I've learned that it is actually possible to have pregnancy and motherhood work for you. It is possible to have a different experience than is accepted and expected and than most women are settling for. So if you're asking for an extraordinary experience in motherhood and beyond, you have come to the right place. And guess what? I did not start out as smart as you by a long shot, because when I started looking for information when I found out I was pregnant, I looked in all the usual places. I Googled, I read a lot of books, and I talked to some friends and family and providers. And I'm not going to say, actually, maybe I did say those are the wrong places, but the thing about looking in those places is you are getting all the information about how to have a normal or usual pregnancy. You're looking to all of the reference points of what pregnancy is usually like or expected to be like. And as I say, maybe you actually are asking to have something entirely different than that, something unique to you, something that really is your creation and a creation with your baby and with your body. And good luck finding resources out there about creating that kind of pregnancy experience, one that's really all about communion and also trusting yourself instead of looking outside yourself for information. Everything I'm going to talk about today and in future episodes, I started out by learning the hard way, and then things got easier. And since this is the first episode, I'll tell you a little bit about me, and so you'll know where we're headed when I tell you about how I got there. I've been a massage therapist and a craniosacral practitioner since the late 90s, and I'm also a life coach and energy transformation specialist working with the tools of Access Consciousness. And Access Consciousness is a body of work designed to empower people to know that they know. I also live in the Seattle, Washington, USA area, and I'm a writer and a singer, a cat lover, a coffee drinker of magnitude, and I also really enjoy swearing, which you will probably hear, and chocolate, which I would share with you if you were here with me now. At the time of this recording, I'm 50 years old. My oldest daughter is 13, and my younger daughter is 9. So by the time I had kids, I actually thought of myself as pretty capable and accomplished person who was good at managing things, and I mostly felt I had it under control. The thing is about having the point of view that I had it under control is that it was actually a setup, which I will talk more about in a minute. I got pregnant the first time when I was 35, and I had a miscarriage at around 8 weeks, and then I got pregnant a few months later. And when everything was going well at around 11 weeks, I started planning. And I thought by working with midwives and planning a home birth, by receiving acupuncture and opting out of genetic testing, that I was actually doing enough to choose a different experience than the normal and the usual. I wasn't going to let mainstream medicine take over my body and my birth. That was my point of view. But here's the thing I didn't really get. Pregnancy and birth weren't something that with all my planning and all my managing, I could actually control. I read a lot of books backing up my belief that natural or out of hospital births were a good choice. I watched all the movies about how hospital births were risky and full of interventions. And so I thought I was choosing something different, but what I was really doing was putting a lot of energy and focus on what I did not want, on not having and avoiding the hospital instead of inviting in or allowing and being curious so I could receive and be open to having the birth of my dreams. In a future episode, I will tell you the whole story of my first daughter's birth, but for today, I will tell you that with all that control, all the energy I focused toward what I didn't want, all the judgment and conclusions, all the resistance, I actually created the exact opposite of what I was hoping for. I did indeed end up in the hospital with almost every intervention short of a C section. And what I know now is that with all my control, I actually created more risk for me and my baby and more trauma. And I've seen this cycle happen again and again with other women. But it doesn't have to be that way, and I know that to be true. So, my target with this podcast and the Calmer Mom Project is to offer other moms a truly different reality with pregnancy and birth, one that includes communion with their being, with their body, with their baby, whether they deliver at home or in the hospital, vaginally or via C section, according to plan, or some completely unexpected way. So let's fast forward about 4 years after that first difficult, traumatic birth experience. I had a second miscarriage, and then I got pregnant with my second daughter. And I was basically setting myself up for the same exact thing. As I said, I'm not as smart as you guys. I was just repeating myself. And I was still focused on what I didn't want. I was still trying to control and plan and hope my way out of the traumatic birth experience. And I didn't know what else to do besides just try to control it so it didn't happen that way again. But at some level, I must have been asking for something different in some way because on the day my baby was due, I went to a class and I was introduced to a set of personal transformation tools called Access Consciousness. And perhaps for the first time in my pregnancy and birth journey, I began to trust myself and to trust my baby, to actually communicate with my baby, and to ask for what I wanted instead of resisting and running away from what I didn't want and what I was afraid of. And instead of always looking outside of myself for the information I would need or I thought would make everything okay. When I got home from that access class that night, my water broke, and by the next morning, my birth began to not go according to my plan. At first, I got scared. But then I started using the access tools that I had learned the night before. I trusted my knowing. I connected with my baby and my body. And I asked some questions. And I listened. And we ended up creating the home birth, which, even though it was not exactly as I had planned, it actually did gift me with everything of which I had dreamed. And that was 9 years ago. Since then, I've heard hundreds of women talk about their pregnancies and births and the time after their babies were born, and most of them talk about it with resignation. They read the books and the blog posts and listen to their providers that tell them that everything is normal, and it may be normal, or it's not normal, so they should just resign themselves to this difficulty, whatever it is. So here's my question for you. I'm imagining that sometime fairly recently or in the last few months, you looked at that pregnancy test, you saw that positive, and if you're like most people, most women, if you're like me, you immediately started looking outside yourself for more information on how to get this whole pregnancy thing right. But when you look to somebody else or something else to tell you how to do something without being very clear on what it is that you would actually like to create, how could you ever possibly get the information you really need? It's like if you want to go to Spokane and you start asking directions to Portland. It's not going to get you where you need to go. It's not going to give you the information you require. So here's where you need to start. Start asking yourself, what would I actually like my pregnancy to be like? What works for me? Get curious about your baby. Get curious about your body. Get curious and wonder and wonder and wonder, and imagine the possibility that you could actually have an extraordinary birth experience. You could actually create this not to look exactly like you plan it to be, but for it to feel like what you'd like it to be like. If you have found this podcast, my guess is that a normal, common pregnancy and birth is not all that you're asking for. That you at some level won't settle for just normal, for just typical, for just common, just what's to be expected. You're actually expecting more. Not just what to expect when you're expecting, but actually expecting and willing to have more. You actually know that there is something greater and better and more extraordinary is possible. Because you are extraordinary and your baby is extraordinary, you can ask for more than normal. You don't have to settle for good enough. But you won't get to this extraordinary through managing and planning and control. It takes a different toolkit. That is why I am so grateful you're here. And that is why I created this podcast. Because I believe every woman every woman could have the birth of her dreams, a birth that really feels like everything she desires. And I'm here to help. So keep listening to learn more. Hey Mama, are you curious about something you heard today? For more resources from this episode, check the Calmer Mom podcast show notes. And if you know that easier pregnancy and birth and joyful, confident motherhood are possible, but everyone is telling you you're crazy to think so, schedule a free chat with me or discover more Calmer Mom resources at calmermom.solutions. You got this, Mama, more than you think you do, and I'm here to help. Thanks for listening.